I am Dr. Amiri Campbell. I live here on Hilton Head Island. Been pretty much an environmentalist and a historian over the years. The Gullah culture had its origin on the west coast of West Africa, along the Rice Coast. Those folks were brought over here to establish rice plantations. In isolation of the rest of the world, they farmed for the plantations for more than a couple hundred years.
I'm Hank Herring, owner of the Green Herring Art Frame Shop, Bay Street, Beaufort. I've been in art since I was a child, and I've learned through the years. I've been pretty much self-taught, except for as I travel, each place I go, I find an artist that I kind of get myself attached to and learn from. James Denmark here has been one of my mentors through the years, and along with that, I have a passion for art from my mothers, my mother, my grandmothers, my grandfathers, who gave me all my starting equipment, and so I just kept it as a family business. Growing up on a farm, we used everything. So by the time I got to an art class, the products they were using to me it was like I mean it was they were giving me the best of that because I've been making stuff out of anything and everything I could find. When I got to New Jersey, again, I got to my first real class on metallurgy, woodworking, and also electricity. So through that, I've always worked in those mediums to make my artwork. So with the functional art, it allowed me to go along with using materials that are being put out at that time. So now we're such a disposable country that I can find pieces any place and just from there make assemblages. And that, in a way, is my way of documenting what we're doing. Started out as a machinist, so I had to duplicate. I was also drafting. Anything that had to do with art, I was already doing. I just did not have, the art teachers would point out different things in perspective and that. By the time I retired from the Marine Corps, I was here in Beaufort. So what everyone's calling art, me, it was just something I do. And I met Arianne King-Comer, who took me to my first exhibit in Columbia. Walk around and look at what everyone's doing. And I was walking around and I was like, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that. And I was having a good time. It wasn't until the end of the night, we were driving back home, and I said, you know, what they're doing is, that's art, I do that. And she was saying, yeah, I know, that's why I brought you up here. You've been saying that thing I do. So from then I started working with Penn Center and some other, working in schools, and I was having a good time at it. And I started meeting artists with the work coming into the Penn Center Museum. And I remember the first time I saw a James Denmark piece, I was like, oh my God, I'd probably never get to talk to him. So through his wife wanting a mask mounted, we got to talking. He became a mentor of mine. I've done a lot of framing for him, had a good time at it. And so with that, my influences are them from here to Ireland, England, and through Japan. I met different artists all those places, so my work reflects that. So influences a lot. I explore nature in my work mainly by the materials that I use. A lot of my sculpture pieces are about it's called the eyes of nature. In nature, you can see all the different forms, but you see eyes. There's eyes everywhere. No matter what you're doing, how you do it, there's always the eyes. And it's like nature is always with you. And we have to be very aware of the fact that whatever we do takes from nature. We also give back to nature, whether it's good or bad. We have global warming and everything we talk. So we've taken away, we're also giving back. Are we giving back the good? We need to really address that. And I think artists, in a way, really address that because through what you said earlier about documenting, we document the things, the way they looked at a certain period of time. And then later on, as you see another rendition from the artist or another artist, you find out how much nature has changed or our lives around us. So it's very, for the artist to keep going, very important. You know, when I first got to Beaufort, I heard of Sam Doyle, and it was a long time before I actually saw his work. And during that time, I think it depended on who you were hearing about him from. It was like they were trying to make up your mind before you even got to see his work. And when they were telling me about him, I was fascinated. I just had to see the work, because I met a few people that actually met him that would go by and talk. So when I finally got to see his work, I understood it. He was, I mean, not only was he documenting history, but everything that he was putting art on, I thought it was fantastic. I was like, I have no limits. I can put my work on anything I want to. There's no limit. And so with that, Sam Doyle, it rates way up there for me.
Actually, in seeing his work and seeing the approach that he took, he had no limitations. He did not conform to anything academic. He was an artist in his soul. And when you look at the paintings that he put on wood, on tin, on cardboard boxes, whatever he could find, it was the art that he transferred from his person to these materials that we still admire today. And see, that's what art is all about. When you are born with the artistic spirit, it's hard for anybody to harness you or to harness your mind, because you can take nothing and create something. And you know that when you have discovered yourself and when you're honest with yourself, you get up and you have to do it. This is why a lot of artists are loners, some are misunderstood. They don't care about all that. They care about getting this spirit that's in them that they were born with. If you don't do something with it, it'll do something with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
James Denmark is my name. I'm a fine artist, and I started this long road as a child. And at this age of 85, I'm still feeling very young and creative. My earliest memory of an artistic experience was my days in grade school and high school. I did not have a formal art teacher in either category. However, I did have administrators, mainly the principal, who allowed me to form an art club and go to the library and invite any other student who was interested in art to come in for an hour, and we would compete with each other, basically drawing cowboys and Indians. Actually, what I do is basically based on my life experience. I grew up in Florida, and I went to high school in Florida, and from there I went to college in Florida. And after college, I moved to New York City. And I moved to New York City at a time when most of the great recognized artists from the Harlem Renaissance were still alive. And I had no fear of looking them up and going directly to the studio or wherever they lived and knock on the door, because I wanted to meet them. And I had read about them in many books, and they were very kind, and they helped me develop my career in New York City, and that's about it. Basically, Romeo Bearden, Ernest Critchlow, and actually Frank Wimberly, Robert Carter, all these guys were established artists, and they had their works in galleries, and some of them had their works in the major museums. After moving from New York City to the Low Country, I really fell in love with the way things were structured. The marshlands are space that I didn't experience in the city, and then seeing the people who had inherited traditions that they still use today. So my first experience was on St. Helena Island, and I was invited to a fish fry. And of course, when I was in New York, you go to the supermarket or you go to the fish place, market, and you buy fish and you bring it home. And the man who invited me on St. Helena Island, he didn't have any fish, and I was wondering, well, we're here, so where's the fish? And he had a net, and he went out and he cast the net and he caught fresh mullet and he brought it back. And the interesting thing was, after he had all this mullet in the net and they were jumping around, he said for good nature, he picked up one and he threw it back. And I said, why'd you do that? He said, that's for the future. So actually that experience stuck with me. And then he came up, he cleaned them, he had a hole in the ground, he put the thing there and he cooked the fish, and of course all the people in attendance had a wonderful time. So I really cared about that, and that sticks with me today, to be able to relate to what's going on, watching the pattern that the birds take when they fly across, and watching wildlife and all this stuff. All this is real, and is something quite different from listening to the squeaky sound of the subway and the horn of the bus traveling through the neighborhood. This is, to me, wonderful. I think nature is a power that most people don't know how to harness, or they don't know how to use it, and they dismiss it. They become more regimented to say their own power, as opposed to believing that there is something more powerful than you, and that it can feed you and inspire you and give you strength to move on, but you've got to relate to it. And as an artist, I think that's one of the top jobs, that you must be able to communicate with that, and at the same time, it gives you the inspiration to create. Because if you're a creative person, you have a natural power that other people don't have. They may have verbalization, but they don't have at their fingertips to bring something in that was never there before, that may remain for years to come. And I learned this by going to the major museums in New York City, where I saw 5,000 years of artwork at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. And I went from ancient Egypt through Rome, all the way, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute. This pair of shoes that was created in Egypt are more modern than what I just saw on Fifth Avenue. And so it really inspired me that the creative mind, the creative talent, and so forth and so on, is really a powerful force, and that it touches the lives of many, many people when the artist himself brings it into being as a result of having an idea while he's sleeping and getting up and creating it. I would look at it this way. I have a grandson who is also an artist. And somehow when I look at his work and I look at how advanced he is at his age, I look at myself and I ask myself the question, was I that good at the point that he is now? And I can't answer that simply because the weight on me is to continue to create until the very end, and let someone else be the judge of whether it was good or bad. I have been fortunate enough to be in some major collections in the United States. I have run into major artisans rather, who make prints and so forth, and they have really helped me a lot, and I've met a lot of very famous people as a result of being connected that way. So to me, I don't want to think about it. I just want to keep going and keep going and keep going.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Green. I'm the Ambassador of the Arts for the City of Charleston, and I'm also a 45-year surviving successful artist. I have painted mostly about the Lowcountry region. That is illustrated in the book Gullah Images 2 with the foreword written by Mr. Pat Conroy. I'm from Gardens Corner, South Carolina, where I still attend church, with the exception of COVID going on right now, at the Husband Baptist Church. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I don't ever remember not being an artist, even though I didn't know the terminology of an artist, but I was always making things. My grandmother, my mother, my babysitter Eleanor would all tell you that I had been creating, wanting to look at something and either find the beauty in it, make beauty of it. I was very skilled in design early in my life. As a child, I was very skilled on the farm. I loved flowers, arranging flowers, planting gardens, anything having to do with making a physical change for beauty or for the purpose of easy accessibility or usage. I was interested in doing it. I document and preserve history in my art and culture because I am a workaholic. That's all I do. I have been working every day of my life for as long as I can remember. Even as a child I worked. I worked consistently with my grandmother around the house, in the gardens. I worked in the schools. I was a member of FFA, Future Farmers of America. I was always active in the art departments in the schools. I went into the military. I was very active not only in the military, but I was active in the communities around the military. After military, I went to the Art Institute of Chicago. Not only was I a full-time student at School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I had 2 part-time jobs. I also, one of my part-time jobs was a security guard at the Art Institute of Chicago because I felt I needed to learn as much as possible because I entered art school at the age of 21. People are about nature. People cannot survive without nature. What I would like to add is that I've always felt that Gullah people have been the keeper of the land, the landscape, the nature of things around. As a kid, I remember my grandfather, the care he would put into the land, the landscape, using natural, what we call today organic materials. So that is, that's an earthly part of who I am. So when you're looking into my paintings and you see the marsh and you see those far distant trees that look like mountains, that's a love for a landscape that you see every day. I've traveled around the world, and I know of no part of the world more beautiful than the low country of South Carolina, and that was all formed and shaped by West African ingenuity. Some people look at it as enslaved culture. I look at it as West African ingenuity and what they have done with those rice fields, and then made those rice fields after the crash, after the Civil War and the crash, into the most important hunting grounds, then bird watching. So it is so we, in terms of the Gullah culture, the African American culture, have to realize what our ancestors have set in place for the richness and the beauty of this low country culture that people from all over the world want to come to see. Our ancestors made that happen. And if we could just find a way of appreciating that, get away from the plantation mentality, but get into the plantation beauty that your ancestors built and maintained.
Hi, I'm Inabinett Mack, and to say something about me, art is my passion. I first became interested in art in 1953, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. I actually started as a collector. Went to my first art exhibit in 1953. I moved to New York and got married, and my husband took me to Greenwich Village to an open air art exhibit. And I thought it was the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in my life. I just said, this is me, this is what I want to do. And I saw an ad in a Good Housekeeping magazine for a paint by numbers kit, and I wrote off, I ordered it, and it came with two stamped or outlined paintings, and I started messing with them. I kind of backed into business. I'm a health professional by basic education. I'm a registered nurse. I taught psychiatric mental health nursing. And when I moved back here to South Carolina from New York, people would come visit, and I had art hanging, and they'd say, oh, where did you get that? I like that. So I started selling work off of my walls, my personal collection. And then I thought, this is a business. So I started a little business called Special Things, went to framing school, learned to frame, and then moved into the Red Piano 2 Art Gallery when Luann LaRoche opened it and was gracious enough to let me hang some stuff in there. The gallery, well, after Luann opened the gallery, she decided not to do it after a period, a couple of years maybe, and I came together with Elaine Scott, and we became partners. I took over the gallery and hired people to work in the gallery, and then decided that I needed to do it myself. So I retired and I did it full time up until recently.
Who were some of the first artists that you worked with?
Diane Britton Dunham, who is local. She lives locally. She's from Ohio originally, but she was a friend. I met her through her stepfather, and they had just recently moved from Ohio, and she said she was an artist. I exhibited her first work, and that's how it started. Then it branched out. I used to buy prints. It was more of a print business, and then artists just started coming from everywhere.
Why is it important to preserve indigenous American culture through art?
I think that art is an excellent medium for capturing the Gullah lifestyle. I have an abstract here today, but this is unusual for me. I paint the Gullah lifestyle primarily, but so much of boating, fishermen, basket sewing, quilts, music, all of that is captured through art. I don't know. It's just this thing that, I love it. I guess it's the beauty of it. My people were quilters and seamstress. They were more needle trade kinds of, but that's an art in itself. I always did sewing, and I just kind of branched out into making art. I don't consider myself, I know a lot of artists that are much better artists than I am, but I don't know that they bring more passion to it than I bring to it.
I'm Diane Britton Dunham. I am a Creole artist. I've been creating this specific genre of art for about 30 years now. I am a resident of the Sea Islands, specifically from Beaufort at this point, but lived in a couple of different places that landed me here. I am, I guess, a cultural preservationist. I try to preserve our history and culture through artwork, and I try to document the stories from my elders and my ancestors. My earliest memory is painting the side of my mother's Duncan Fife buffet with green paint. And I specifically remember the green paint because I thought it was kind of really cool how the brown wood sort of came through that green textured paint. I guess they had been doing some work on the house or something. I really don't know. I can remember that part because it was a big deal. I must have been about 3 or 4 because I was not as tall as the buffet. I remember my mother complaining about it, and it was a big deal with my grandparents. And she said how she just couldn't get me to stop drawing these little monkeys all over her walls. And she didn't know what to do about all of this drawing that I was always doing all the time. And so that's my earliest recollection. So I guess I must have been about 3 or 4. And then as I got a little bit older than that, I was in the comic books. So I used to draw my own comic book characters. So I guess I was about maybe 9 or 10 then. And I had a neighbor that used to do the bubble. And so I used to do these superhero-like women. Wonder Woman was kind of like my thing. And but they didn't have any Wonder Woman that looked like me. So I did my own. And so I must have been about 7 or 8. So those are my earliest recollections. But art has always been a part of my life, always, as far as I can remember. I think my fascination with history and culture began in the 80s. And that's when I started doing my family's genealogy and going through research and archives and going through microfiche, trying to find what information I could on my ancestry. And it was the difficulty in trying to find something on that led me to realize how important it is to preserve this history and this culture for future generations. I speak through my art, and I tell everything through my art. So that's how I began to, I guess in the 90s, is the early 90s is when I began to start to document our history and our culture in my artwork. How do I do it? Just simply by painting those images painting those images of the important parts of our culture. Whether it's something that's significant, as doing laundry, because laundry was a significant thing for women in those days, and not just women in Gullah Creole culture or Gullah Geechee culture. Laundry is a big deal for women of all cultures around the world. And so these type of things, the rituals that go into almost everything that we do, and almost everything that we do is ritual. And I just found it fascinating, from creating basketry, from the harvesting and the planting, agriculture, so all of these things. Yeah. And so that is how I do it. There are significant moments in history that, past and present, that I've documented in my artwork, specific characters, so to speak. But my thing was not always the famous characters that everybody paints. You know, of course I've painted Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and these amazing people who went before us to give us strength in their stories, but the unsung heroes of our culture are the women that I paint and the women and men that I paint. And the daily life is so important to have, because that way of life is gone now. That way of life is faded. So I think I've captured that way of life in all of my artwork. What was my experience like? It was liberating, reflective. I mean, my feelings about it was simply being a part of it. And I say Gullah Creole, you know, instead of Gullah Geechee, which is Gullah Geechee and Gullah Geechee Creole. It is the same in my Gullah Geechee. But the Creole side of it is my mother's side, who's from Louisiana and was Creole. And my father's side, well, is Creole as well, but his lineage takes us back and takes me back. I have a direct ancestor from Charleston, South Carolina, was a Gullah woman. So also the environment that an artist lives in, they are definitely influenced by the culture that you're with and you're in. And it's my appreciation and my connection to the Gullah culture that you also see in the artwork. So some paintings are definitely specifically related to the Gullah culture. Some of my paintings are definitely specifically related to the Creole culture. And then there are the commonalities. There are those in between. And when I say commonalities, it is the rituals and the traditions that, as Southern African Americans, that we all share. Those things that we brought with us from West Africa when we came here, that's been passed down generationally. So all of those things are sort of combined in what I do. What was my first experience like on that? It's just a wonderful, amazing, fascinating, I guess, because I'm still doing it after 30 years. It's fascinating and very deep, very rich, and I still have a lot to discover. I still have a lot to do. That's a question I'm always asking, most Gullah artists are asking. I guess everybody has their own definition or their own way to describe why they do that. But I do it because it's the X factor. And when I say it's the X factor, it's like an equation. Okay, I want you to figure out what they look like. I want you to see their expression. I want the mind to imprint that face on it. And I've done my job if I've done the environment, the composition, if I've done the body language, the clothing, and all the things around it to tell that story in that painting. And when you see that emotion in that person's face without me drawing that face, then I've done my job. So that's the X factor, that's the equation. Okay, I don't know what some of the ancestors look like. So when they're coming to me and coming through me when I'm painting, okay, I allow them that space to imprint their own face in on the eye of the beholder. And it works because people get it. People see it. They see the emotions, the face, the happiness, the joy, the sadness, whatever feeling that you're trying to convey. If you've done your job right, then that's going to do that. Now, not all of my paintings are faceless. There are paintings that I do have faces in them. But that's usually when I have a model. And usually I'm painting like from a photograph or a family member or someone, you know, from specific memory. But when I'm doing something that's like most of the ancestral stories, that's the X factor. Let's let the ancestors imprint their face in your mind.
I'm Natalie Daise. I'm a storyteller and visual artist in Georgetown, South Carolina. My earliest memory is my father sitting at the dining room table doing paperwork with a tortoiseshell fountain pen with blue-black ink. And I was reading, or was I even old enough to read? But I ran in and said, "Daddy, draw me a lady." And he stopped, and with that beautiful blue-black ink, he drew a lady. I took it, I ran back into the room. Then I came back, draw me a man, and he did. I think that's my earliest interaction with art. In kindergarten, I was the little kid who drew the pictures that actually looked like people. And so other kids would come to me to say, you know, to draw the girl or draw the, you know, little kids are drawing horses. And so that was my early interaction with art. But I remember that Daddy and that fountain pen. I didn't call myself an artist until I was in my 40s, maybe my 50s. But there was a friend of mine, her name was Mary Gibbs, and I went to visit her one weekend, and she came from a different background than I did. Her dad was a doctor, and her mom, you know, they had this big house, and she was taking art classes. And she was showing me her easel, and she had these paints with these names like yellow ochre, and I was just, I ran home, and I didn't run home, but when I went home, I told my dad about it. And so 1973, for my birthday, I got a Grumbacher oil painting kit. And it had some of those board canvases. And that was my first interaction with, like, it was oil paint. And so I just started teaching myself how to use it and have been playing with paint, and I love art supplies. I would get pastels, I would get color pencils, and I would just teach myself how to use it. So since I was 12 or 13, I was playing with materials. I started doing like pastel portraits for kids in high school. I didn't call myself an artist, I was just playing. I'm still playing. I'm celebrating us. I'm not going to even say elevating us. I think we're already elevated, but I just want to show it. I think we're already sacred. I just want to show it. I think we're gorgeous. And so, you know, my daughter is often amused. I've painted her many times, and there is really no way to paint my daughter without showing how holy and powerful and beautiful and strong and sacred and all of that she is. And I do that with all the women that I paint. I think I have a hard time separating the Gullah woman from the woman. So much of the story of the African diaspora in America originates in the story of Gullah people. And I grew up in upstate New York. And I came to the Gullah community when I was 22. My grandmother was here. My auntie and uncle were living on Ladies Island. And my stepmother said, you know, they talk funny and they wear loud clothes. That was my introduction. I now talk funny and wear loud clothes. But I found a sense of self in the Gullah community that tied to the land. That you could, you know, like lots of us who are in the African American diaspora, we've migrated. My parents migrated north. But when I came here to say, you know, to know people who say, well, this was my mama's land, this was my grandma's land, this was my great-grandma's land. My ancestors put their feet here. That's just really powerful to me, that connection to the actual earth itself is just really powerful to me. And I think that also infuses my work. Well, you know, we talked about the sacredness and the beauty and the power. But lately, very lately, I'm thinking a lot about the concept of work, about what we did with our hands. As a storyteller, as an oral storyteller, when I go to schools, I often say to the children there, our ancestors brought everything they needed here, here, and here. Nobody had a suitcase. Nobody had a backpack. And so what we knew how to do with our hands, what we remembered, what we believed, shaped everything that we know now. And so I want my art to sort of tell that story, tell the story of the power of what we did with our hands and what we knew. and what we believed, and all of that is infused in it comes out in the hands. You'll see lots of hands in my work as well. Mm-hmm. I think that it is patriarchal in structure, but if it's unacknowledged matriarchal. You know, there's the idea I'm a man, and this is what we do, and we Gullah men, and we do this. You know, we're men. But where the power is actually happening quite often is with the women. I mean, the black church ain't gonna be no black church if the women weren't doing what the women are doing. And, you know, they might be, you know, taking care of the minister and doing all that. But we're running the show in some form or another. And, you know, we're taking care of the families. And we are the healers. And we are often the griots happening, and sometimes it happens in the kitchen, but where we're passing on the stories. And we move, even as we move beyond traditional roles in the culture. Like I said, you might look at it and say it's a patriarchal culture, but at its core, it is not. No. Now somebody be mad at me about that, but. Nature is very obvious in my work because it's really, it's such an important part of my life. I think that the earth is not a rock that we're living on. The earth is a living thing. You might even say it's sentient, that as we are aware of it, it is aware of us. To think otherwise is faulty. You know, there are studies that say that these plants are aware of my existence and that trees communicate with each other. And if they're doing that, then they're also aware of me. And our interaction with the earth is one of the things I think that helped us survive some of the most grueling circumstances. Even when we were working the earth with, you know, blood, sweat, and tears, we also were in a relationship with it. I had an uncle who was a naturopath. He was from St. Helena. And, you know, he taught me a lot about herbs and things of that nature. And I'm seeing more and more people reconnect to the earth in this way, developing that respect for it. You can't just cut it down. You can't just pave it over and exist. And certainly during this pandemic, my garden, those trees, that's one of the reasons I'm still here. You know, I think I was talking to someone recently. I did a video, you know, that they are releasing oxygen, and this symbiotic relationship where I'm breathing out this carbon dioxide, and they're taking it in, and they're releasing oxygen for me. That's a relationship that we're in. So it infuses all my work. This connection. Since I've been in Georgetown, I've been exploring rice and the role that has played. We know the role it played in the economics of the state, but you know, it's part of our African heritage, this rice. And even as we were enslaved to produce it here, we were in relationship with it. So I've been exploring rice in my work as well. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, it's all of a piece. So it's hard to say this is how it does this. It's all of a piece. When we connect with nature, we are connecting with our spirituality. And you my family and Ron's family, they're very traditionally, you know, you go to church, you do this, you do that. That's religion. But in terms of nurturing your spirit, a lot of that has to do with simply observing and being aware of nature. Just being aware of it is a spiritual act. And for some people, they don't recognize that. They think religiosity and spirituality are the same thing. My husband, Ron, and I had been storytelling and traveling, doing programs about Gullah culture full-time since 1987. And I had one baby, and we packed the baby up and went on the road. Then I got pregnant with the second baby. And I was like, you know, man, I don't know if I can do 2 babies on the road like this. There's got to be something else. And we knew there was something else, but we didn't know what it was. And we asked elders who we respected, and they would say things like, well, it's time for you to stop playing and get jobs. Y'all need to be grown-ups now. But we're like, that's not it. And then a writer, Gloria Naylor, who had written a book called Mama Day on St. Helena Island, had bought a house out there. We'd become friends. Invited us to dinner out on a seaside road. And she was with some folk who were going to produce a movie for her. The movie never got made, but it was Lawrence Fishburne and her friend Maria Perez who was going to produce this movie. We're eating cold chicken. I'm pregnant with the second kid. We start talking about children's TV. And Maria says, you know, Nickelodeon's trying to diversify. Wow, maybe we could do a show about you guys. And Gloria said, oh, they're great. They sing, they tell stories, they're great. And we were like, yeah, right, sure. She called back. I was really pregnant, said I'm not coming to New York. They came to Beaufort, hired a guy from Charleston, followed us for a day, took the film back to New York. When my son was 5 weeks old, we flew up, we had a show, just like that. No agent, no manager. Grace, the next thing that nobody knew, what we knew it wasn't was, oh, stop playing now. And we knew that wasn't it. We didn't know what it was, but grace. It was just grace. Not just grace. It was absolutely grace. Yeah, I don't underplay grace. So much stuff doesn't get written down. My daughter, who is a historian, she's a public historian, she talks about the lived life. The lived life is history. What gets written down is what someone who has access decides is important. But every story we tell is important and is a part of history. And so much of the Gullah culture was passed on orally. Even us sitting here right now, we're adding to the body of work that tells who we are and where we've been and where we're going. So, you know, I'm a storyteller, and I've always been a storyteller. And that stuff is every bit as important as what somebody decided to put in a textbook. It has been an ignorance, and I don't say that that's not a negative word. It's simply we did not know. We didn't know. We didn't know what was important. And those who were in charge told us that these stories were not important. They told us, well, here's what's important. And maybe, you know, if it's not Latin-based, it's not important. If we didn't write it down, it's not important. And so we have had generations of people who did not know the value of their lives and of the lives of their ancestors. But we are doing better.
I'm Amiri Farris, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. And my work revolves around themes that have to do with culture, nature, perspectives, sexuality, race, gender, and of course, Gullah Geechee cultures. In the works, you can see lots of different layers that have to do with the nature, return to nature theme, and you can see different elements of nature in the work. So why art is meaningful to me, I have a saying that art is everything. Again, I think art can be found everywhere in our world. So everything that we do in life involves around art and design. So from the clothes that we wear, the cars that we drive, the football game that you watch, you know, there's some aspect of art in each one of those elements. And then also providing public works of art. I think that's very important to inspire and reach new people that might not be interested in art. I like to consider myself a professional artist or a master of the arts. So I think by you know, having that term, you know, I can work in different genres and not just be stifled or not just be put in a certain category. Again, people know me as a painter, and then they'll see my sculpture work and they're like, oh, I didn't know you were a sculptor. And then they'll see me doing poetry or performance art. And they were like, oh, I thought you were a painter. In my work, I'm very figurative. You can see, you know, if you're looking at a painting, so perhaps behind me, you can see a woman with a sweetgrass basket. And again, I try to make it look like that woman was there in that time period. I think it's very important to me to try to capture that essence of that figure, and not so much of it being a character, but I also have my own style in the way that I'm showing, that imagery to you. So even though you can tell that it's a figure, you can definitely tell that it's still my style. So I think as an artist, I tried to show, both of those things. So I find it very important to make the people look like Gullah Geechee people, and again, they're doing those traditional things, working on their land in a bateau, working with a sweetgrass basket. So again, I try to capture the essence of the people. And I do that because I think the Gullah Geechee people are very happy people, and they're very connected to the land and nature. So as an artist, I find it very important to influence the next generation of artists. And so I do that by often doing artist talks. I am also a professor and a teacher of art, so I often will teach younger people the different styles of art, and I think I find it important as an artist to be involved in the community as much as I can. Find it very inspiring to the people that I'm working with, not just at those different institutions, but say if I'm going into like the Boys and Girls Club and they say, oh, you're so cool, like you can do, you're interested in like comic books and different characters that we might be interested in, but you're creating these fine works of art, and you're doing other things, and you're just being out there as an artist. So I like to tell people, you can do other things in the art world. You just don't have to be a painter. There's so many things that you can explore now in the world of art. So you can be like an art therapist, you can be a videographer, you can be a graphic designer, you can be an architect, you can be a photographer. There's so many different things. So when people a lot of times they think of art and artists, they immediately go to painting. And again, I like to say that art is everything. So everything that we do, someone has to design that, someone has to create that. So those jobs are out there. So it's just using your creativity differently than, just doing painting.
This is a project that I started thanks to my wonderful girlfriend, Nikki Finney. She sent me a book of poems, and it was titled Rice, when Richard and I were in Naples, Florida back in the 90s. And I kept that book in a book of poems in a very sacred place. And I didn't know Nikki that well, but it was just something about rice that was just caught me about that book. And then when Richard and I had made plans to move to Charleston, I had heard and read about the reactions of people in the Low Country in Charleston. I've been coming to Charleston quite often. I first came to Charleston under the auspices of Louis and Marlena Osteen. That Charleston Grill restaurant was then the Omni Place. And I had events at the Gibbs Museum, at Dock Street Theater. So I had been coming to Charleston a lot as a professional artist, but not so much as just a general citizen. I have always felt that in returning to Charleston, I needed to return here with confirmation in terms of myself as a person. I didn't want to return to Charleston as a young black guy, or a black guy, or a black gay guy, or a Republican, or a Democrat. I didn't want to turn on any of those things. I wanted to return with something to share, to introduce people to perhaps a new concept of how we look and explore ourselves. And I thought that because the biggest word in the South by everyone, it just flies off their lips as though it means nothing, is slaves. And I wanted to really get into that issue of why people are so comfortable with calling black people slaves when the entire world has been enslaved over and over and over again. Why is it about black people that most white people think are slaves? So I used the Low Country Rice Culture Project, which is a body of studies that I've done around rice culture, because rice culture was a way of directly dealing with the plantation culture, and that's where it happened. It was also a direct way of dealing with West African culture, in that they were West Africans that made Charleston the wealthiest city in America for well over 100 years, which led to the Civil War. And they cleared the land to build many of these cities, the highways, the byways, they built the plantations. So they were skilled people in every aspect of culture, including medicinal, foodways, law, you name it, every aspect of this of America. And so I needed to get to what we flourished in, and we flourished in rice culture. And as using rice culture as a way to have conversations about history and culture without someone coming in feeling less than, also dealing with those people that feel greater than, in terms of people that are descendants of plantations, to be able to have a dialogue with them in terms of their ancestry, because now we have to find a way of living together in terms of sharing our history, restoring our history, preserving our history. We have to figure a way of doing it together, and the only way we can do that together is honesty, respect, and a better understanding of world history and culture. And rice is probably one of the largest grown plants on the planet, and it encompasses almost every culture. And the great ingenuity behind rice, what it takes to have these rice fields and rice culture is just amazing. Even you can see the rice fields from the moon. It takes the work of a pyramid to create the rice fields at these various plantation sites. And to have a people that have been enslaved, but also in enslavement found a sense of self-worth and value. They had to do that in order for us to be here today. So I'm looking at us rising to the level of educational understanding and just plain old respect for people in terms of whom these people were, whom they have left behind, and us being stewards and ambassadors of the Low Country from the perspective of understanding West African culture, European culture, being able to talk about, for instance, Queen Charlotte. No one ever speaks of her Africanness, who was the Queen of England, whom much of this comes from the era of she and her husband. She and her husband, they lived a long time together as a couple, and they had many kids, 12, 13 kids. So when we think of Charlestown, that's King Charles III. We think of Charlotte, that's Queen Charlotte. So I'm hoping that rice would just, I know, not hope, I know that rice is that one dialogue, that one topic in a conversation in which we can have some dialogue, constructive dialogue about history and culture and whom we are. And with that, I am working with, and my Low Country director, Dr. Kim Long, who is at the Gibbs Museum. She's scholar in residence at the Gibbs Museum. And what we're working on now out of the Low Country Rice Culture Project, so we use the Low Country Rice Culture Project as sort of like a hub to get other things going, to get involved with other things. And one of the most recent is going to be the posthumous citizenship of Africans and African Americans before the Civil War. So all of those people that worked on those plantations, in those rice fields, that were never honored or respected, not only by white people, but also by their own people. This is a way of taking us back in history and at least giving them the honor of being American citizens.